The North Metropolitan Region, and I've been your member since 2017. I do want to begin by acknowledging we are meeting on Wujak and Wujak, and to pay my respects to the elders past, present and emerging, and acknowledge that many sites are potentially under at risk, and I really grieve for that, and I am sorry as a result of this development. So a little bit of history about where the Greens have been on this. So some of you may remember the Honourable Giz Watson, who was the former member for the North Metropolitan Region. And she started asking questions about the scope of what was being proposed way back when she was in Parliament. She lost, the Greens actually lost the seat in 2013. And between 2013 and 2017, you did not have a Green voice in the Parliament for this area. It would appear that that was the point where we saw a bidding war between Labor and Liberal, who had complete control of all of the seats in the North Metropolitan area, to see who could build the biggest possible marina that you possibly could imagine. And as we know, they went to the 2017 election in lockstep with each other in terms of what they wanted to see and the scope of it and how big it was going to be. I ran in that election for the North Metropolitan Region. I was the former member for the East Metropolitan Region, and that's when I won the seat. And I want to say that one of the first things that I started to do during the campaign back then was I started looking into, okay, what is happening here with the Ocean Reef development? I looked at the previous work that had been done by Giz Watson, saw that she had started asking some quite pertinent questions about the environmental implications, and so I went, okay, I need to actually take a look at this myself. At that point, we were being given figures of a 98% approval rate for the establishment of the Ocean Reef Marina, and I think that's something that's quite significant to note. But I was particularly concerned at that point about what was being proposed for the Bush Forever sites, or should I say Bush Forever for now, because it's an absolute mockery in terms of what we're doing with the remaining urban bushland on this one coastal plain. And so I was working with the Urban Bushland Council to try to look at the implications and the footprint and what was being proposed. And went to the election saying I'm really not convinced on this development, certainly the scope of it, and I understand it's really popular. People like the idea of an upgrade of that particular marina because it's old. But when I started asking questions, it became quite clear that no one was anticipating the scope of what was being proposed. So when I started asking about this and started asking questions in Parliament and started raising the issue in Parliament and finding out more, well, frankly, as you've just actually heard, you start going down the rabbit hole on this, don't you? Because you start looking at the impact of what's going to happen on the marine park, and then I started working with the abalone fishermen who remain particularly concerned about what's going to happen. And also it became very apparent that the community consultation around this was absolutely woeful, that people really didn't know what was going to be proposed. So I've been trying to raise this issue more broadly without the sort of advantage of a community campaign behind me for quite some time. Why have I been doing that? Because I'm a Green, and because the Greens care about the environment, and the Greens are prepared to take up the issues which may not be popular, and we are prepared to ask those hard questions. So as I was doing that, I'm going to let you know, your local paper is crap. Won't actually publish anything that is actually about genuine local issues where they've got local members who are raising concerns. And instead all you see is them sitting there while you've got Labor and Liberal cutting the ribbons, feeling proud of themselves and getting all the kudos for this wonderful thing that apparently they're doing without any questioning about whether it's actually in the best interest of the environment or even the local community that's going to be directly affected by this. So I have been raising this issue, meeting with the proponents, meeting with fisheries, meeting with the stakeholders like the abalone fishermen, meeting with the Urban Bushland Council, and more recently, finally, making contact with members of the community who've been at this for a very long time. And we've still got quite a bit of work to do. What we know is that the urban bushland is being destroyed. Shame. What we know is that the abalone are going to be compromised. Shame. What we know is exactly what was just been said, that we're going to see quite significant concerns around what's going to happen with this coastal line. But also, the development itself is compromised because of climate change. We know that that's a huge issue, and as has just been said, people are trying to move away from these coastal developments, not looking at actually taking our fragile coastline and adding to the burden that is there, but particularly with such a wildly out of step proposal. So why are Labor and Liberals so determined to just proceed with something so huge? Well, can I suggest it's more than simply the problems. And just I want to make sure, because I don't want to miss any of my points. It's not just the concerns about what's going to happen with this development environmentally, but you should start asking some very serious questions about what's happening with our planning laws. So one of the things that I want to point out is that the planning laws themselves have always been deeply flawed. And one of the reasons for that is because we do not have any third-party right of appeal here in this state. Now, third-party right of appeal is something that is available in every other state, just not Western Australia. Apparently we're very special. But the Greens have been talking about needing to have third-party right of appeal, and I've been talking about it through this term of government as well, since the mid-90s, since Jim Scott first took his seat in the state parliament. So this is not something that's new to us, this is something that we continue on. Particularly, Elena McTiernan has been deeply opposed, and now Rita Safiotti is deeply opposed as well. Not only are they not interested in looking at third-party right of appeal for the community, they've gone one step worse. I'm curious to see a show of hands. Are any of you aware of the COVID-19 emergency planning laws which were passed by the Parliament? Only a handful of you. Okay. Under the guise of COVID-19, this government introduced last year, with the support of the Liberal Party, but the Greens absolutely spoke out, I spoke out specifically, and voted against, emergency planning laws that are in place until 2025 that actually grant the planning minister the capacity to override all planning parameters and to just sign off on large developments. Are people aware of that? Are people aware of that grab for planning? There's no transparency around that. Okay, I've tried to draw attention to this. I've written pieces. The Post has been really good, at least being prepared to highlight it. Your local paper won't, so crap, did I mention that? And so that is the grab for power. And they've done that under the guise of economic stimulus. But can I just point out, we're talking about major developments that can be signed off in 2025 that may not even have to lay a single brick until 2027. It's nothing but a grab for power. And one of the other connections I'd like you to make is our donations laws, and specifically as they pertain to property developers. Now, what we've seen in New South Wales and in Queensland, as a direct result of matters which have come out through their various corruption bodies, a necessary move to ban donations from developers. We don't have that here in Western Australia, and we need it. Because at the moment, not only can developers actually donate to the Liberal Party and the Labor Party, and they do in huge amounts. Did any of you hear about Rita Safiotti sitting down on Monday night and having a nice little quiet, chat with Nigel Satterley? Being able to pay for access to the minister. Any of you want to pay $1,500 to get access to the minister, to have her hear what you've got to say as well? Yeah. Wow. Well, that's actually outlawed in other states, and it's becoming outlawed in other states, but it's not happening here. So I want you to think about this. I want you to think about the scope of developments that are being proposed, about the lack of community consultation that's occurring, the fact that we're the only state that doesn't have a third-party right of appeal, the fact that we have got ministers who can be brought to sit down to listen to proponents that have a lot of money, and that's not unlikely in this state, in an environment where this government have given themselves unprecedented powers over planning laws, and in the legislation it even says they can approve things which would otherwise be deemed illegal. Think about that. So that is what they've done. Now, the Greens spoke out and voted against that. And if you lose your voice in Parliament with the Greens, well, you're going to find that you've got Labor, you've got Liberal that are absolutely in lockstep about that. So I'm running for re-election again, and I've been doing the work on this for 4 years. If any of you want to come and talk to me about it, and in fact, if you'd like me to send you through the screeds of pages of work that I've done in the Parliament around this, trying to draw attention to this, trying to get to the bottom of the scope of it, I'm more than happy to send that through to you. I do know there are some people here who know full well how hard I've worked on this. But I do want you to think about this, and I want you to think about it in the context of an election which is over the final polling day, which is in 7 days' time. And I'm going to put the pitch, because you didn't have a Greens representative from 2013 to 2017, and that's when this thing arced up at the most. And if you want to lose the owner voice again in Parliament, whatever. That's what then really you're at the point where you go, well, who's going to speak? And the answer is no one. I'm here, I'm quite happy to take on the unpopular issues. Hey, I'm a Green. That's sort of what I do. And I'm also really passionate about this. I'm devastated what's happened with the urban bushland. I'm devastated about what's going to happen with the marine park and with what's going to happen in terms of the scope of development. And I just think it's appalling the way that the community has not been consulted appropriately. So thank you for listening to me. There's a bigger picture here at play, which is around our planning laws more broadly, and when we have to do some urgent work. And I do want to say that if you want to start arcing up about that, you will find there are community groups right around the state that are starting to say enough as well. So we need action, and we need action urgently. Thank you.